आतापासून जरा मोठं झालंय ना घर. हा? ये इथं.
Hello, everyone. Today, I bring to you a dialogue with Jinan K B. Jinan has now dedicated his life to learning from children. He believes intuitive cognition that's present in indigenous communities, especially in children, has a lot for us to learn from. He feels modernity and the values and aspirations that come from it is tearing our society apart, tearing our humanity apart. After studying engineering, he moved to a design school where he discovered what it means to experience life and learning from life. He contrasts his learning in engineering school with his learning in the design school. He set on a long journey that has taken him to creating workshops and educating parents who want to imbibe in their children ways of integrating with nature, expanding their consciousness, and maximizing their innate potential to learn. So over to Jinan. Hello, Jinan. It's good to see you. And I'm glad we had a conversation before this session. So I also had a chance to watch all your videos. So I'm all prepared with lots of questions.
Yeah.
So I want to give you a quick background of why I'm doing this. The first is, of course, this year is my father's birth centenary year. And he was born in an era of independent struggle for India. He joined Gandhi's freedom struggle and was always dreaming about the future of India. And he believed in grassroots level transformation of India. And I thought through these series of dialogues, I should celebrate all the different kinds of grassroots level dreaming that's happening in India, the projects that are happening, because I believe India is too big, too complex, and too rich in culture and every way to be left to any one individual political party or any kind of a system to transform itself. It has to be like rain, in which naturally falling seeds from trees and pollens that butterflies carry from one place to another, bees carry, they create a whole forest. That's my metaphor. So what I'm trying to create is I'm trying to create rain and wind so that all these pollens and seeds incubate a new dreaming for India. And from that perspective, I'm talking to you because yours is one of the seeds that has the potential to grow into a part of that forest. We don't have to conform to preset ideas, preset models. And talking to you made me realize that you have such a unique perspective on learning, on what children need to blossom into their full potential. And therefore, I think a conversation with you is worth capturing and archiving for children and parents to watch for the next 100 years. So that's my purpose.
Okay.
Does that align with your purpose of what you're doing?
Absolutely. Only thing is that what I tell my people who work with me is that this project is a 1,000-year project, not
Okay.
100 years.
Okay. See, I'm not sure that YouTube will survive for 1,000 years. Humanity will, and I
Yeah,
think
that's why.
what our stories sit
Yeah.
in people's minds and their bodily sensations.
Yeah.
I think that will survive for 1,000 years.
Totally. That's what I meant.
Yes. So I want to start with a question.
Yeah.
Having said this background, you have a very interesting background. You started with engineering education. You did it for 4 years. Then you went to NID to study design. And from our last conversation, you said that these two modes of learning, you could see a stark difference. Can you tell me a little bit about that epiphany or revelation that you had while transferring from one domain of learning to another domain of learning?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, the first domain is not learning. This is what I would say. Because this whole engineering education, or the education that happens, which is teaching based, ready-made knowledge based. There are two things. One is that the act of teaching and the notion that there is ready-made knowledge to be transferred. That is the paradigm of modern education almost everywhere. So only when I went to design education that I found that knowledge is something that you create as and as you explore, you begin to create knowledge. So one is actually, I call it the learning paradigm, and the other one is teaching paradigm. In teaching paradigm, teacher is the authority. In learning paradigm, student is the authority. Student is in charge. So that's a primary difference. And the other differences is that design and NID was fundamentally rooted in experience, whereas all the other education has nothing to do with experience. They only have language as a source. Whereas design actually is the real world, that's the source, meaning you do and understand. So at every level, these two are almost like two different paradigms, I would say.
So for the benefit of our audience, can you explain the difference between learning through language and learning through experience?
Well, what I would say is that, I normally say literates learn the word, illiterates learn the world. You see, so language, this is a myth that you can learn through language. That's a myth because, see, reading, I was listening to Marshall McLuhan. McLuhan saying that when you read, you're making rapid guesses because the very root meaning of the word read comes from some French word which means imagine, guesswork. So what you essentially do is when you read, you're actually making up stories in your head. You see? So we have a myth called knowledge. We don't know what it is. We have imaginations of that. Whereas experiential learning, this is absurd a word. That word is an absurd word created by modern minds. Experience is a choiceless activity. You are not choosing to experience. So experience is what learning is all about. There is nothing called experiential learning.
Mm-hmm.
These are not two different things. Experience means you learn. You see, the issue is this, that we can understand it very clearly. If you look at every other living being who are learning without choice, because learning is the nature of life. It's not a choice. Whereas educated people seems to think that we can choose to learn because you can read another book. But your senses you can't choose. There's no way you can choose what to sense,
So
it's like breathing.
I understand. So my question here is, I understand what you explain as an individual.
Yeah.
I engaging with my surroundings has a sensory experience.
Yeah.
I feel the cold. I smell the nature or smell whatever is surrounding me.
Yeah.
And that is the direct manifestation of what my surroundings are about. I don't need language for it. It can sit in my memory as a sensation.
Yeah.
But my question is, human race has lived for thousands of years. I can understand an individual lives through an experience, but how does that learning get transferred through 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 5,000 years?
Another assumption of modernity that knowledge is transferred. You see, I have been living with non-literate communities for many years. That has been my life from 93 onwards. So I began to understand many of the myths that modern educated people have. Number one myth is that knowledge is transferred. See, in indigenous communities, knowledge is recreated. And you recreate knowledge through doing it. You see, how can you teach somebody to swim through language? I'm giving one example. If swimming has to be learned, you have to swim and learn. So if you look at all the traditional craftsmanship, it is all coming from recreation of knowledge. It's an absurd idea to tell that, that the potter is teaching their children how to do pottery. Absolutely no. I have been actually spending time documenting how the whole process happens. There is no word called teaching in most of the indigenous vocabulary. Learning is there, but no teaching. What teaching is an absurd. Sorry.
No, so I'm sorry for interrupting you. But my question was, so do you subscribe to the idea of knowing?
Knowing. Knowing is natural. You don't have to create an effort to know. It's like this. How did we learn our mother tongue? You see, and I keep telling that in Bangalore slums, children learn 4 languages by the time they reach 4 years. Nobody is teaching there. What I'm trying to say is that learning or knowing is the very nature-given aspect in it's a biological quality. Depends on what is there in the context. So in Bangalore slums context, there is, Kannada is always there. Kannada, Tamil, Hindi, Telugu, and sometimes Malayalam, and sometimes, so they pick, and Hindi also. So they pick up so easily 4 to 5 languages with absolutely no effort. Because there are people in the surroundings who are speaking that language. And mind you, nobody is teaching them. You see, this is the most important thing to understand, that learning is a choiceless activity, provided the content is there already.
So that's yeah. I understand. So why do we need language?
No, language is not for transfer of knowledge. It is for communicating things. It is not for transfer. This is an absurd idea that modernity, because see, we are trapped in the literate way of knowing, which is about reading and thinking that we have understood. See, I keep telling that through language, we can only create myths in our head. Because see, the reality should be seen first, no? Without the message through the senses, how do you even know what we are talking about? Language is nothing but it denotes something, na? But what it denotes? If that is not there, then what are we learning? So we make up stories in our head, and then we create a world that is mind-constructed world. Of course, things are real for you. A simple example is that, you see, when I look at the indigenous children and their way of living, there is nothing called toy there. So there is only one integral activity, which is cognition, that they are understanding the world. So they playfully understand the world. But we have created schools for learning, playgrounds for playing, toys for, doing other things, then art for something else. So we have now created different compartments. Now that has become real for us, because the next generation will see that, when the child is reading, he's learning, he's coloring, then it is doing art, he's with toys, he's playing. So we have created a fragmented world with our mind, and now we assume that is the way life is.
I get it. So I have a question for you. When tsunami happened in south of India,
absolutely, yeah.
The indigenous people,
they
all went up the hill. Almost nobody died.
Absolutely, yeah.
Why did that happen? So what was the difference between the knowledgeable, learned, modern living people and these indigenous people, what happened in their cognition that didn't happen in other people's?
Absolutely. You see, they are actually, because every other living being also knows how to do that. So they are only utilizing the ability, which is life-given ability to connect with the world through senses.
Mm-hmm.
So they are able to see this sensory. The problem with the modern educated people is that they have absolutely no idea that what is the powerful ability of senses, intuition, insight, and all that. They only know how to reason. See, just today, I'll tell you one interesting thing that happened today morning. This lady who is working with us, she told me that when she was carrying her child, her husband used to beat her. He used to come drunk. And she was telling me that, you see, the child in the womb could feel that, You see, this is a common sense understanding of most of the illiterate people, that the child in the womb is able to absorb what is happening outside. But if you tell this to an educated person, they will ask you proof. Because see, modernity is trapped in proof. There's no trust in life. Somebody has to, and proof means what? Some expert has to tell them. It's not a proof that they are able to prove. Somebody has to certify, and scientists has to certify that no, you do this. This is what science is. You see? So this is another myth that, we keep undermining these illiterate people, indigenous people, by telling that they are superstitious. I'm challenging this notion. I think the educated are superstitious because they've only replaced what to believe. Modern educated believe in science, that's all. There are very handful of people, maybe 100, 200 people, who have actually done anything, to understand. Other people rest only read books and believe it,
So this is interesting. I want to come back to your transition from engineering education to design education.
Yeah.
Here, they were at the same time in human life, engineering education and design education.
Yeah.
Design education was still within institutional structure of education. It's just that the way we went through that process was different from an engineering education.
Yeah.
So, in your view, is there some kind of a model of learning emerging that is either similar or different to design education?
You see, there were some fundamental flaws with design education. I'm not telling that is all perfect. Because after all, again, the design education at NID was framed within the Western framework, which means your aesthetic sense is Western, and design process is taught like a method, so it will become a formula for you, which of course the design thinkers have made it into absolute formula, 5-step formula, you see. So the spontaneous nature of design, the act of design, is killed because it has been, turned into a method to be followed. So, and I understood all this only because I went and started living with indigenous communities, and I began to observe how do they create their, crafts, and how do children learn. These two gave me a very core, understanding of how do we actually learn the real world. You see, I will tell you one or two very fundamental flaws of modern education. Number one, their science begins with doubt. You see, but if you look at indigenous science, it starts with feeling of mystery, feeling of wonder. They don't doubt anything that is happening. There is a complete reverence to life without damaging it, without, so you observe life, and there are also, because I've been looking at some of these issues like what is intuition, what is insight, what is metacognition, all these things, because you see, in indigenous communities, this is all possible. This is all happening. Whereas in sorry.
No, keep going.
But whereas in modern society, if you look at, you just look at what is metacognition. They say it is thinking about thinking. That's an absurd idea, actually. It is not thinking about thinking, metacognition. Metacognition is another level of knowing what you already know. Simple thing I'll tell you, that we all have learned, when we learned grammar, in fifth standard, sixth standard, I think it was the most boring subject that anybody could go to. But the fact is that all of us know implicitly grammar. We all knew grammar implicitly. We can't articulate what is grammar, but we knew. That's why we are able to speak very well. I'm talking even at the age of 5. You knew you could speak very well, which means the ordering, implicit understanding of grammar you had. That's why you're able to speak. So to me, it is through a metacognitive activity that you are able to decode what you already know implicitly. You can make it explicit. So basically, metacognition is nothing but an act of explicating what you implicitly know.
And what is the mode of making it explicit?
Through being aware. Awareness. That when
so bringing it from your subconscious to your conscious.
Really, not really. That, see, for example, suppose let's see, we want to understand grammar. So as I'm speaking to you, and as we are having conversation, I am not only hearing what you're telling, but I am also intently listening to the way you are telling it, how you are telling it. So I have two attentions happening at the same time. That I'm actually hearing what you're telling, but I'm also paying attention to how you're telling it. And I can actually have another level. See, I also feel that metacognition can also have 3 different questions. See, I believe that why, what, how are the fundamental existential questions in which, based on which we are living. These are inherent questions of life. It's not something that we have to generate. Life has given you these 3 things: how to do things, what to do, and why to do. So the same questions can have a metacognitive act also. So when I listen to you and when we speak together, converse together, my attention can go into all the 3 questions. I can think, why is he telling this? Usually we do that, no? When we are speaking to each other, we are hearing, but there is also another mind working. Hey, why is he telling this? Correct, no? So it's the same thing, So if that become a very, very impersonal kind of an activity, that why is he telling this? I mean, and I'm doing that with everybody, not particularly with one person. Then I'm able to understand why that particular, why you are speaking certain things. No, are you getting my point?
So let me summarize what you said, and you can tell me whether I've understood it correctly or not.
Yeah.
So essentially, what I'm hearing is that it is in human nature to intuitively learn around what, how, and why.
Absolutely.
without using the language tools to make sense of those 3 aspects of the life surrounding us.
Absolutely.
And that is what you call in one of your presentations. You say all living beings are involved in making sense of the world, responding to their respective contexts intelligently. Learning, knowing, being is the very nature of life. Like breathing, learning is choiceless. That's what you wrote. Yeah. So in that case, I have 2 questions, and I'm going to ask both of them, and you can answer either in one or the other first or together. So my first question is, what does one seek in life? And in a typical traditional way, one could say wealth, prosperity, happiness, whatever it is. But I'm just seeking at that. And number 2 is, what do parents prepare their child for? So these are the 2 things.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I actually want to look at this in a two slightly different way.
Okay.
One is something that has been forced by modernity on humans. So I believe that modernity is absolutely destructive to life. And we are reaching there, no? So it's a fundamentally a destructive space. And so to me, I began to look at this because this parental thing, I would say, it's a very, for the time being, I'm not interested in that because they will finally, send children to school to earn more money. That's a route that is designed by modernity, trapped by modernity. And I believe that if Earth has to survive, I mean, human beings have to survive, Earth will survive. If human beings have to survive, they have to step out of modernity's paradigm and understand the indigenous cognitive paradigm, which has sustained life for centuries. So this destruction began around 1500s, 13, 1400s only. The journey towards self-destruction began. Till then, none of the indigenous communities were suicidal in their acts. A bamboo artisan would, cut one bamboo out of the whole, bamboo clusters. But none of that wisdom lies anymore in the modern minds. We are only thinking of more and more, amassing of work, but destruction at the same time. So it can't go together. So I believe that all the drama that is being done by the UN and all that, the sustainable nonsense, some goals they have put, none of that is going to work because the same paradigm, the same mindset is operating. The only way we can save ourselves is by understanding what is an indigenous cognitive paradigm. A paradigm in which you, by default, you create sustainable knowledge, not as an afterthought. By default, that you are life. You are the world.
So my first question, so what are we preparing the children for? What is life's purpose that they should, they would continuously seek?
Yeah, so to me, this question I've always asked from the point of view of life. To me, I feel that the only purpose that life seems to be having is to sustain life. That whatever is the difficult situation, somehow, you see, in all this concrete also, you see a spout coming out, the tarred road, you will find somehow a leaf, a plant, small plants, tiny crack, it comes out and, and the people trees that take over our old houses. So, and also the amount of flowering that happens, just look at a mango tree or any tree, millions of flowers. So I always feel that the life is somehow wanting to sustain itself, and it is making all the effort to continue life, sustain life. So I would say that should be the essential aspect of human being also. That sustaining life is the primary purpose, which is what we have now turned against, the whole modern paradigm. So to me, based on that only, I would say that, you lead a simple life, lead an authentic life. I think a potter, an illiterate potter in a small village is far more authentic than all these educated people, even the spiritual ones. I think he is leading a much more spiritual life because he is absolutely not harming the earth. That's what I feel, that artisans are actually, they are life itself. They are part of nature. They are nature.
So I get it. So what you're saying is that simplify life is a very important message. Awaken your sensory apparatus to sustainably find a connection with your surroundings. I'm also hearing that something that you did not say is that the goals of modern living, such as prosperity, wealth, are of less importance than connection and sustenance of life and
absolutely.
nature. So one question that comes to my mind is, in this kind of a living, you and I are both wearing glasses.
Yeah.
How does a product like this emerge from
You see,
the lifestyle that we...
very interesting. So in indigenous communities, nobody wears this. You see, I find when I live with these people, I find so much, I'm jealous of them, many of them, Hardly anybody has a glass because, see, they don't waste their time on reading all this nonsense here. They are seeing the real world. They are seeing and also, see, the one bigger problem that the literate people have is that they're, most of the time, their focal length is fixed. You see, but when you actually engage with the real world, eye is making constant moves. The focal length is continuously changing. It is also has a wide angle. See, one of the things that I've understood is the way eye functions for a non-literate person is very different from the way eye functions for a literate and a modern person. And that also affects the memory system. And indigenous communities, memory is organic. It is also choiceless. But we have to memorize. And our wide angle view is gone. Our long is also gone. So we have a fixed, fixed space in which most of the time we are looking, and with the mobile phone coming, it has become more narrow. Angle is fixed, the length is fixed, the what do you call that? This angle is also fixed.
So my question is, what is your vision of a society in which all of these insights that you have gained from indigenous communities, how would you like humanity or community or a nation to evolve?
Yeah, you see, when I have lived in rural tribal areas, traveled in many, many places, I have found that the traditional India was not hierarchical in the sense that you will hear of silk being produced in small villages in different places. You see, now what is happening is that everything happens in the West, it comes to us. It comes to Delhi or Bombay. Then it comes to another town. Then it comes to smaller town. Finally, it reaches the village. But if you look at a village society, earlier societies, if you take just some crafts, brass, for example, or silk, for example, all these things, they were, many places that most people had not even heard of. All those places had been producing silk, So they were always places of excellence all around. So when a child is growing up say, for example, when I lived in Orissa, in a small village, the child had a fantastic experience of various activities happening there. I was with the potters, there was weavers there, bamboo artisan, farmer, then few kansharis, the blacksmiths, and of course, beautiful, mountains nearby, greenery around, the river flowing, clean water. You see, now all that is gone. Now, where is the clean water today available? And we are all having chemical food. So I believe that we have to, because when I say this thing, people say, should we go back? I'm not telling you. I don't know whether that term is a very modernist term, going back and going forward. Because in indigenous societies, there's nothing called going forward or going backward. There is only, one way of living. It is neither going backward nor going forward. That very notion is a very linear notion, hierarchical notion of modern minds, So I think that we need to have a healthy, authentic life, which I think modernity is anyway not providing. You see, what I'm afraid is that I was just 2 days ago, I was thinking, I do a lot of this parenting workshops. I call it do nothing parenting workshops. I actually And I refuse to give any solutions to anybody, because I believe that the child, when the child is seeing the mother or the parent depending on an expert, what is the child imbibing? You see? So I want to ask these parents, do you imagine, are you thinking that your children will also depend on a parenting expert to parent? Or you want to, you know, because if you look at the earlier generation, hardly anybody went to a parenting workshop. Now what you see is that the more you get educated, the more you are incapacitated to look after your children. And what will happen to the next generation? They will have absolutely no idea what to do. So I think this species is in a huge crisis, but somehow people don't understand. And I believe that only by revisiting childhood, that what is to be a child, what are the limitations of, see, we can't always say that human beings are, that everything is okay. No, the human brain is absolutely pliable and vulnerable to damage also. It is vulnerable, it is pliable. That also means that it can be damaged. And I think what modernity represents is the damage of a cognitive system.
I understand. So now I'm going to go into your personal experience. Through this whole consciousness that you have gained, how have you altered your life to move closer to your imagination of what is a better way of living?
Yeah, I mean, first thing, I chose to live in a small rural area. You see, at engineering itself, I had decided two things: never do 9 to 5 job, and never do anything you don't like to do. So that option I had taken right from and of course I had a leaning towards Marxism, socialism, and I'm aware of what your father did, and Fernandez and that whole gang, actually, Chandrasekhar, all that. So I already had certain sensibility to move away from the way modernity is functioning. But when I went to NID, that became far more clear, because to me NID was like a womb where my process of rebirthing began to happen. I'm really thankful to that times when there was a lot of freedom and there were people who could nurture us in that way. I don't think in any other institution one could stay like that. They will throw you out like this within. But I was able to stay there for 3 years and continue a fantastic journey of inquiry. And so I completely simplified my life. I started living in a rural tribal area. My needs have been reduced. And I've hardly ever worked for any corporate sector. Never worked, actually. So so that way I'm completely free from all that kind of thing. And working with artisans have been fantastic for me, because they are only actually, because many people say that you're sacrificing your life to help them, but I really don't think that at all. I believe that it is only because I went there, I was able to learn and change myself, because I was able to really understand what is to be nature. I've not become anything like that. That's too much. It's very difficult, actually. That is why my focus on children is precisely because it's like this. Once the milk is split, there's no way you can put it back. This is the problem, that our body and mind is like the split milk. Modernity splits our body and mind, and reintegrating that is a very, very difficult task. Whereas indigenous illiterate communities are absolutely integrated in their mind and body. Every children, wherever they are born in the possibility for integration. So that's why my focus is, to make people understand that this whole modern study on children is absolutely wrong. They have to be studied in the context of indigeneity. See, I keep asking people that if you want to study dogs, you have 4 options, which is most people will choose the first option, which is to read one book and write a PhD on dogs. The second option is the option that the rest takes, which is to study the pet dog, which you can your access. The third option is, of course, the street dogs. But the fourth option, which is the best thing, is to go to the jungle, their actual habitat, and then study a dog. Only then you will be able to understand what is the nature of a dog. Exactly like this, children need to be studied in an environment where they are absolutely free. Like if you can find in the African, the hunter-gatherer tribe, or anywhere where education and the West has not entered, that is the place where we must, or education and progress. That is where you can actually understand what is actually the nature of the child.
I like that. So in your do nothing workshops, I want to learn a little bit about that. So who comes to those workshops and why do they come?
Well, right now there are about 60, 70 people from the West, because there is a book called Continuum Concept.
Mm-hmm.
And that lady actually went to Amazon, and there she lived with for a Amazonian tribe for some time, and she was amazed at how children were happy there. People were happy there. There was nothing called parenting there, so everything natural was happening. So there is a group in the parenting group, in the Google group, who are part of that. And I have had exactly same experience when I studied children in indigenous communities, and I've been articulating this for many years. And I understood that this is the way children actually naturally grow, And also from India also, there are many people who understood that schools are very dangerous. So many of them who come to my workshops are people who are afraid to send children to school. They have understood schools will damage you fundamentally. And there are lots of homeschoolers and unschoolers, they call all these kind of names. So many of them are from that. So it's from all over, there are people who come for my workshop. They don't stay much with me because I don't give them any solutions actually. Because I tell them that the solution seeking is the problem of modernity.
Mm-hmm.
I keep telling them that observe the child, learn from the child. Learn from the child. See, I adopted a child, meaning that child came to my life. I wouldn't call it adoption. So I took 2-3 decisions. Never say no to her, because I see in villages, no is never told to children. Always follow her. Don't lead her to do things, and never lie to her. So when she came, right from, she was born, she was with me. And that changed my life completely. And because all these lessons are coming from indigenous people, they are not my, ideas. I see that in indigenous communities, a child is, see, I talk about freedom. A child in the indigenous community is actually free, because there is no word called freedom. That is called existential freedom, where you never ask anybody what to do, when to do, how to do, nothing. It's like a dog. Dog doesn't have to ask permission, no? Or any animals. It's only the modern educated families where the child has to ask permission, the parent has to give permission, or no, deny permission. All this drama is a modern idea.
So again, I want to pursue my question a little further.
Yeah.
You said you very clearly defined the kind of people who come to your workshop.
Actually,
you also said that they don't stay for too long.
No. You see, that's because, it's not that they don't stay for long. There's already around more than 1,000 people following me on the groups.
Yeah.
So it's not that. What I'm telling is that it is a little tough. See, there are things like, I tell them that start using ground. Remove furnitures. Take away all the toys. And do not have your property and their property. That this is my space and your space. No. This is my thing and your thing. You see, all the destruction that we are doing is because of all this kind of ideas we have. We are creating selfish people by doing all. We are teaching them selfishness. Possessiveness. Whereas in an indigenous community, why are those people not very possessive and not very individualistic? Because the very life is like that. No? You don't have a, they won't say, don't take this, don't take that. This is mine. This is yours.
Yes,
So
I want to, if you don't mind, with your permission, I want to interrupt. So I didn't complete my question. My question is, today, you and I are sitting several decades after we went to NIT, reflecting about what that experience did to us.
Yeah.
So my question is, are there any of your workshop attendees who have come back to you saying what effect that workshop had on you, on them?
definitely, there are people who stays for a very long time.
And so
many
what
people,
are they telling you? What alterations have they made to their life that has worked for them?
the basic alternate, the modernity is a very, very, because the conditioning of modernity is very hard. You see, you are made to follow somebody. That's the first thing of modernity. You're forced to follow a method.
Mhm.
You're forced to conclude, So, and in my workshops, I turn this around. First thing I tell them is that don't believe one word I say. Observe your child. If I show you, and I don't talk, I show things because I've been documenting what children do. From that, I tell them that you look, see, observe your child, and then if you see that, what I'm telling is, then you can decide whether you agree with me or not. It doesn't matter whether you agree with me or not. No, the matter is that are you understanding your child? That's the primary thing. You don't have to agree with me. I'm telling, observe your child, observe without any preconceived notions, remove the things that will distract your child. See, what I'm telling is very simple, that for a child, every object is a potential toy. Because every activity is a cognitive activity. When every child, when they sit on a sofa, they start bouncing. Why is that every child doing? So what I began to do when I began to observe children, I saw a pattern emerging that every child is doing certain things in a similar way, wherever they are. So I ask parents to...
Let me pause a little bit. My question is, what are they telling you? What are they bringing back? What change in their life have they made that they're telling you?
For example, I'll tell you one interesting example. So she started observing, and then she started observing birds. And then she had this urge to buy a book on birds and start reading their names. Suddenly she felt that no, that will distract my observation. That she came back and told me, see, I'm now observing very well. So the shift I actually make is that stop making stories in your head, observe, and don't conclude immediately. So that is happening. That's why they are,
I get it. So I want to shift the focus. I want to ask you another question. Yeah. When you and I had our earlier conversation, not during this call, you mentioned that two books had a profound impact on you. One was Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, and the other one was Gandhi's book. I forgot which book you mentioned.
Truth.
Which one?
Experiments with Truth.
Okay. So it's very interesting that Ayn Rand and Gandhi are like two ends of the pole.
Absolutely.
Also, I'm finding it interesting that just 5 minutes ago, you talked about prompting people to not be selfish. But Ayn Rand wrote a book about virtues of selfishness.
Yeah.
So my question to you is,
yeah,
what did you learn from Ayn Rand and Gandhi that you are applying to your current state of being?
You see, in Ayn Rand, Fountainhead, I did not take the selfishness part. I took the commitment of Howard Rock, that absolute commitment to action. And all the compensation was done by Gandhiji. See, Gandhi's book, reading that book was absolutely mind-blowing. You see, because I had this pseudo background in Marxism, I had left, reading Gandhi was out of thing. No, you should not read Gandhi or anything like that. No, but somehow it was good that, one professor forced me that you read this. This is very good. That's how I read actually. And when I read that, it's mind blowing. Actually, it's completely. I started realizing such a simple man, simple mind with such high thoughts. Because usually when you come across, these philosophers, they already have a very complicated minds. You don't find simplicity in them. Whereas this person was absolutely simple, but with very complex ideas, And it was an experiment, with his life. So, well, I'm not following any of these people, but I took the spirit from Ayn Rand's spirit of commitment to action, which also Gandhi had. It's not that Gandhi didn't have, but somehow I happened to read Fountainhead first, so that moved me into a. Also my need for authenticity. All those things became questions to me. That one must do something. You see, I was actually wasting time in engineering college. I was not at all getting involved. So it was in fourth year that I began to read this, and somehow I felt completely dissatisfied with life. That you must actually, yeah,
It's very interesting you said this because, my father was a socialist. When he was 18 years old, he wrote Marxian literature.
yeah,
But and then he got involved with freedom struggle when he watched Gandhi talk about quit India in Gwalior tank in Mumbai.
yeah,
And it permeated his consciousness. And when he was in Bangalore jail during emergency, he wrote a book called Marx and Gandhi, where that's where his transformation from a Marxist to Gandhian happened. Probably
yeah,
it was happening over time, but that's where he put it down in a book form and
yeah,
reflection form. Also, because isolation of prison gives
yeah,
you a moment to reflect without being indoctrinated by others. And so I find a very interesting transformation that you had also paralleling with what my dad had. But I have another question now. Um, so I understand Gandhi, the impact he had on him. So what would be your, we are now coming close to like the end of our conversation. I must respect your time constraints. What is like through, I want this video to be uh to survive for next 100 or more years, which aligns with your vision to keep it for 1,000 years.
yeah.
What would you like the future generations that would be born and growing up of both children and parents to learn from our dialogue when you and I will not be on this earth?
Yeah. Well, learn to respect children. That's and we have to create a space that is absolutely child-centric. See, there is a whole wrong notions about child-centrism that is happening in the West today. That is not child-centrism at all. Child-centrism is respecting them the way they respect everybody else. So don't create silly books for children, silly cartoons, silly things for children. So see, I think in order to do this, there has to be absolutely fresh research on children. Absolutely fresh research. Because modern understanding of children is absolutely pathetic. They are 100% wrong. You see, I'll tell you that literacy marked the infantilization of the child. The dependency on the child was created with literacy coming in and making education as an activity that is dependent on reading, learning, Till then, learning was something that the child doesn't have to depend on anybody because they are using their senses. For sensorial cognition, there's only sensorial cognition, you are not dependent at all. But with the coming of literacy, that's a time when the child has to learn how to read and write. And then, according to them, you learn more, So
I
that is the
agree.
first dependency that was created. And you created a different class altogether. Children is different from adults, educated adults. So I think, see, one very important thing that the Western cognitive science is missing is that the impact of these kind of things on the consciousness, on the wiring of our brain. You see how the world will wire us, how the written word will wire us, how the digital world will wire us, how the social media, the virtual world will wire us, is something that there is absolutely no study. And the way the modern, people are behaving, you can see that, the people who have been, wired, the cognitive wiring happening because of social media and virtual experiences, they will have a completely different beingness. I talk about formation of beingness. What is the beingness that we should look for? They should be by default nature centric, by default child centric,
So last question now. I want you to look into the screen, and are you talking to this person 50 years, who will be on this earth 50 years from now?
Yeah.
And so would you be talking to a parent or to a child? Who are you talking to first, my question?
Not to children at all. I only talk to older people. I tell them, leave children alone. Don't give them any theories. All the talking should be done to the adult who has misunderstood children. That's all.
Okay, I like that. So, and you've already said what you want to tell them. I have one question, if with your permission, I'm going to ask, because I'm very curious. You told me you brought a child into your life.
Pardon?
You said you brought a child into your life.
Yeah.
How old is she now?
She's now 23.
And so, how is she different by virtue of growing up with you?
No. You see, she could spend very little time with me. As, initial stages, she was there with me in 3-4 years. Then she was in the other village, in the village, where there are lots of issues happening, that village had a lot of drinking problem, little bit of violence, So all that will affect her also now. So it's not that she is with me. I'm also not claiming that just by living with me, they will be fine. I don't want to claim all that, So I don't want to. I think that living in an indigenous community will be far better than even living with me. I don't think I'm also worthy of that invitation.
That's fine. Jinan, this is such an amazing conversation. I think though we were exchanging words, I was observing you and you were observing me, and I was sensing more of the experience you did not articulate than the words that you spoke. And I was trying to imagine and visualize the life you would have lived and the wonder that you have lived through. And my takeaway from this conversation is that we should be guided by our natural instincts to observe and sense our surroundings. And because we have grown up in a different modernity-oriented society, the only way in which we can actually be led and I would say guided is not by other adults, but by children who have still not lost their innocence and curiosity and sense of wonder. So if we are able to send a message out as a part of our conversation, the message I would send out is prepare the future citizens of this earth who are back to their connection to nature. And the people who are going to lead that are indigenous communities and children. Is that a fair takeaway that I've taken from our dialogue?
Yeah.
And what did you take away from our dialogue?
Well, it was a fantastic opportunity. I hope that more and more people will align with this, and and so it was a nice opportunity for me to articulate, and let's see how many people will align with this and reconnect.
Wonderful, because I also
Sorry.
have read 2 books, and both by Ivan Illich, Deschooling Society and Tools for Conviviality.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've read those.
I believe that if people, modernity to be really understood very well, Illich is the best person, not even Gandhi. Ivan Illich is the most important person if you really want to understand the whole problems of modernity. He has really done a thorough research on everything, actually.
Wonderful.